Hello and welcome to another unit by unit video review here on SkaredCast. Today we look at the next of the units in the Drukhari book, the trusty, deadly Incubi. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to another SkaredCast unit by unit video. I'm Skari, your grateful host, and the fancy Archon. So, we're continuing our look at the Drukhari book. My favorite book so far. Really love it. Fantastic book. So let's dive in, shall we? If you're a fledgling Archon, first time joining us here on the unit by unit reviews, this is a two-part video. The first part of the video sees me talk about the lore of the different unit that we're discussing, and then we go into its statistics, a couple of basic tactics. Now, I do break things down in a lot more detail for the Patreons. They get exclusive content. If you would like to support the channel and become a Patreon, unlock some cool content, list advice, things like that, check the link down below. So, on to the next one. We just finished all of our series on the Court of the Archon, and today we go in to the Incubi, trusty bodyguards of the Archons and other high-ranking officials of the Dark City. So who are the Incubi? Where do they hail from? Let's dive right in. The Incubi are an order of Drukhari that hone themselves for war, and war alone. They dedicate themselves to the perfection of the killing strike, and their true goal is to simply kill as often as possible. Everything about an incubus conveys menace. Spiked armor, segmented from top to toe, horned helmet. For each incubus warsuit is so perfectly designed, it barely inhibits its dexterity. Mercenaries all, the Incubi will fight for anyone at any time, and will even impart their skills to those that prove themselves worthy. Through long and grueling practice, the strong prosper and learn, whereas the weak are cut down and their bodies burnt as an offering to the iron statue of Cain at the heart of each of their shrines. The sundered spirit stone of a broken hierarch is rebuilt into a psychic torture device known as a tormentor and mounted on the incubus's chest. So they wear broken soul stones, where it exudes an aura of terror and malice. The Incubi lead rigorously disciplined lives. Despite their prowess as duelists, even Incubi scorn a fair fight and will concentrate solely upon killing in the most efficient way possible. Their martial style with the claves, these enormous blades, allows them to strike swiftly from various angles with killing blows that can penetrate the hides of a monstrous beast and hulking vehicles alike. Mercenaries, adept at killing stuff, close combat focused, very sort of, you know, aspect warrior-y if you're into the Eldari lore. Incubi are the epitome of just cold-hearted blood killing. Not for pain, not for... just to kill stuff. Like that, they just love perfecting the art of death, which is pretty cool. And of course, if you haven't seen the video on Drazar, the Master of Blades, who is essentially not like their leader, but murdered their leader, and is like a Phoenix Lord, sort of, for the Incubi, check the link down below to the video that we did on Drazar, because I finally got the model. It's an out-of-production model, well, very hard to get model, and I got the metal one, which is really cool. Still holds up, even though it's a very old model. Like, these models are one of the coolest in the range. Beautiful to paint. And on the table, they're not too bad. You know, I've used them a couple of times. If you follow the channel at all, I love talking about things that I have personally had experience with. So I don't like talking out of my backside or just theory hammering everything. Usually, any of the units that I own, I've at least used in-game once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, a dozen times, and I get a good sense of what the unit can do against a variety of different opponents. So, Incubi are no different. Let's dive in to the Incubi unit and really kind of dig into how you could add them to your list or make them work in-game. So, an Incubi unit is 4 power level. It contains 1 Clavex and 4 Incubi. So it's 5 models. The Clavex has an extra wound. So it's 6 wounds for 80 points. Because they are 16 points each, I believe. Not bad. Not bad. You know, they're about a little bit more expensive than a Space Marine. And they're about the same as a Space Marine. They're not as efficient as a lot of units in the book, but the stats and stuff really come into play. So they move 7 inches. The Incubi has a weapon skill of 3+. The Clavex, who's the squad leader, has a weapon skill of 2+. They both shoot on 3+, but they have no range weapons to talk about. Strength and toughness 3 in both cases. Wounds 1 for the Incubi, 2 for the Clavex. 3 attacks base for an Incubi, 4 attacks for a Clavex. And their leadership 8 and 9. So Clavex is leadership 9. Incubi leadership 8, and they both have a 3+ save, essentially power armored. Now, they can include up to 5 additional Incubi, and each model is armed with a clave. That is the only weapon they have. There's no options, nothing. A clave. And a clave is a ranged melee weapon, +1 strength, so they're strength 4 in combat, -3 AP, so they go through 4+ armor, 3+ armor. No, they go through 4+ armor, make 3+ armor 6+, and it's 1 damage. That's it. It's just essentially a power sword, a +1 strength power sword. So, where do the Incubi fit in? Well, they have a variety of cool abilities. Their first is Power from Pain, the basic Drukhari ability. So, on turn 1, they get a 6+ female pain. On turn 2, they can reroll advanced and charge ranges. On turn 3, they get +1 to hit. On turn 4, they become fearless. And on turn 5, any enemy unit within 6 inches is -1 leadership. So they benefit from Power from Pain quite nicely, being that they have a feel no pain, they can get into combat faster, they hit better, and then they won't fall back if they take casualties. They have a rule called Lethal Precision, and this is for the Clavex only. You add 2 to the damage of a close combat attack made by Clavex if the wound roll is a 6+. Pretty cool, actually. I've done a lot of damage with Clavexes. That means the damage of a Clavex, if he rolls a 6 to wound, it goes to 3 damage, which is pretty cool. You know, and this is against everything. A tank, infantry, a monster, you name it. He has a lethal precision. 3 damage can really do some work. When you've got 4 attacks hitting on 2s, hitting on 2s, usually you're wounding on 5s, 4s or 5s, but any 6s are 3 damage. You can take out characters. You can really hurt a tank if you roll 1 or 2 6s in there. It really comes into play, especially if you have like a Chronos nearby to reroll 1s to wound, etc. The last rule they have is called Tormentors, which we learn to the little tormented soul stones that they have. Each time your opponent makes a morale test for a unit within 6 inches of an Incubi unit, and the result of the morale test equals the highest leadership characteristic in the unit, the test is failed and 1 model flees the unit. So essentially, if you roll just your leadership, like exactly your leadership, it's essentially like another way of saying you get a -1 to your leadership. So things around them run away because they're scared. They have a couple of keywords. They're Eldari, Drukhari, Incubi, and they're infantry. So you can take use of cover, which means if they're all in cover, they get +1 to their saves, making them a 2+ armor save. So how do we use Incubi? Well, Incubi can be used in two ways. The first is like a big battering ram. So you put 9 or 10 Incubi in a raider and you run them right at the enemy as fast as possible to try get stuck in to kill as many things as possible. Now, this is a risky proposition because a lot of people start to use screens. So you'd have to get through the screen of chaff or infantry to then get to the meat and potatoes. Something that Incubi struggle against are units with a lot of attacks, a volume of attacks. Why? Because even with a 3+ armor save, they're only toughness 3. So a bunch of orcs throwing 60 or 80 attacks at a unit of Incubi will put enough wounds on the Incubi that the Incubi will suffer a lot. Incubi have a tendency to hit something and kill it, which then means they are very vulnerable to counterfire or to an enemy falling back and then getting shot. So if they get exposed, they die pretty quickly. So I'm not a fan of the big, large blob of Incubi. Although, if you do run someone like Drazar that buffs the Incubi and gives them bonuses to hit, can be really useful against things like Nurgle that have negative modifiers to hit as well. So, the second way of running Incubi is a surgical strike. So you run smaller units of 5 Incubi and Venoms, usually 1 or 2 units, that sit back and are not perceived as a direct threat, but can go in and mop up smaller units as the game progresses, and is still a very nasty proposition. 5 Incubi with a Clavex do 15, 16 attacks, 4 times 3 plus 4, 16 attacks in combat. So 16 attacks hitting on 3s, strength 4, will clear like a small backfield unit or something that has charged into your line. So using them as a counter charge unit or a threatening unit to use threatening bubbles really helps as well. But I'm really curious, if you're a huge fan of Incubi and you disagree or agree with everything I've said, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. How would you use your Incubi? Personally, I only own 5 Incubi and Drazar, so I've only really used the smaller units. But I'd really like to hear your story for the world to hear on how Incubi have worked for you, fledgling Archon. That's all I have on the Incubi. Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. Shout out to the Patreons. If you'd like to help out, check the link below. And I am Skari, your grateful host, signing off until next time. Skari out.